Welcome to Concerns Talk on Embracing Diversity. During this session, we will talk about the different aspects of diversity, look at some of the barriers related to diversity. We will look at microaggressions as well as talk about unconscious bias and look at some ways to better enhance and embrace diversity. So, what are some characteristics that constitute diversity? We typically think about things like race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and age. Those are the ones that people think about and what comes to mind most often. But there are some ones that are less thought about: education levels, learning styles, socioeconomic status, even occupations. Um, these are also things that can become an aspect of why a diverse group is needed and why sometimes people are not able to relate to others. But realize these are just a few. There are so many others. So there are a lot of advantages to being able to embrace diversity. You can build a much better team, and every aspect of the work environment can be improved. So, as we go through this training, and even more so after it is completed, please ask yourself, how am I impacted by diversity on a personal level? And how does diversity impact me professionally as well? So it's helpful to understand some of the terms, and understanding these terms can help you better embrace and value diversity. The first one being culture. And culture is defined as much more than just race and ethnicity. Culture refers to many diverse ways in which humans practice their beliefs within their groups. Um, it is a very, very broad term. Values, the rules by which we make our decisions, good and bad. Biases, these are prejudices, beliefs, and actions that can inhibit the ability of individuals to experience people in a way that is non judgmental, um, being able to um, accept people where they are. And biases are based on what we learn and experiences. And biases can be maintained even in the face of evidence that contradicts them. Stereotype is a widely held, fixed, and oversimplified image or idea of a particular person, place, or thing. When you stereotype, you infer that a person has a range of characteristics and abilities that we kind of ascribe that to members, all the members within that group, which we know we should not do that. So let's go to my next slide. When it comes to understanding diversity, there was a time where we thought we should all represent this melting pot, blended together in a way where you couldn't tell one person apart from the other. But upon closer inspection, um, we realized that that does a disservice to each person being able to bring the many aspects and the wholeness of themselves to any situation or circumstance. So it's better that each person is represented as the true ingredient that they are without having to compromise who they are. So if we say a salad would better represent that. So when you have the salad, you can tell what's the tomato, what's the radish, what's the carrots. You are not taking away anything from who that person is and how they show up, yet we can still come together and make a great meal and a healthy meal at that. So that was a change for a lot of people to go from the idea of this melting pot to the salad bowl, but yet it was a needed change. And when you look at some of the barriers to uh, diversity, part of that comes from the fact that individuals still have a hard time being able to feel comfortable. You have those social, cultural, language, ethnic, all those things can be a barrier to someone feeling welcomed in a group. Even though the person may not make a big deal of it, and we all have to realize sometimes it takes time for us to settle into a situation and feel comfortable. And sometimes it's hard for others to know how to be welcoming. Language barriers can happen even when English is the first language for both people. And how does that happen? Because there could be a cultural negative connotation to a word that someone else may not necessarily be aware of. An example could be referring to a person of color as a boy or a girl in a very playful way. However, those words are racially charged for a lot of groups. And so, even though you meant it in a playful way and nothing negative, that person may receive it in a way with all that history that comes with it, and it could be demeaning to them. So, we have to be able to know that not all barriers and obstacles are made plain to see. Being able to accept the concept of the salad bowl versus the melting pot is a barrier still for some people. I have done trainings where individuals say, I don't get it, I don't get it. Why is it bad to be the melting pot? But you have to get to a place of acceptance. And the only way to do that is to sometimes have conversations that lend themselves to greater understanding. In this 30-minute session, we can't fully do that, but it's a stepping stone, it's a beginning point. One thing we know that's a barrier is if you are explaining a person's behavior or something about them and you reference their culture. Um, this is the example of telling an Asian person, I trust you to do the math on this deal. Well, listen to what you're really saying to that person. Even if you don't mean it in that way, how do you think that comes off to that individual? Or saying to someone of uh, Indian descent from India, um, you can take the notes for this meeting because I'm sure you are a much better speller than I am. We can't say those things in jest. It's not just about your intention. You have to think about how the receiver feels. So when we talk about that, let's look at communication. When we are both sending and receiving messages, we are filtering our communications through many screens based on our own personal life experiences and our group identities. So look at all these things that are in between these two individuals. And that's just a few of them. And so as you look at them, know this is the reason why when we communicate, it's important to restate, to paraphrase, in order to confirm real understanding. We can't assume that we're understood or be able to just believe that the person got it. If you're the person on the receiving end, it's okay to say, so what I heard you say is, and give it back to them and let them say, yeah, that's it. Or they can say, no, that's not exactly it. What I meant to say was, we take a lot of things for granted when we communicate. And when we're talking about working with diverse groups of individuals, we can't just assume that meaning is the same for each person. So take a minute and do some paraphrasing, some restating, some clarification to make sure you were understood correctly. So the acronym of this trouble um, is a way to be able to keep yourself out of a little trouble. So the T stands for taking action. After you learn about different cultures, um, help other people to understand. Share what you have learned so that they can gain and glean that same understanding for themselves. And it's about understanding differences. When it comes to the R for relationships, focusing on relationships involving different cultures, it takes time, it takes work, it takes patience, it takes energy, it takes understanding. So know that you might not just strike up a conversation and you guys be best buds after that. It doesn't work like that. It takes time. And sometimes to glean true understanding, you've got to make sure that that relationship is strong enough to handle those questions in a way that's not misunderstood. The B is building that mutual understanding. And that starts with respect, respecting differences, and listen for more than the words. Listen for the true meaning and be able to empathize with a person as they communicate. And the L is listen with an open mind. Put your feelings aside. When someone's having a conversation with you, and especially if it can be something where you're trying to get your point across, don't think about your response while that person is trying to share. Fully, actively listen. And then take a minute to hear what that person has said, then respond in a meaningful, sensitive way. Don't feel as if you've got to cut off your hearing what the person is saying because you're already believing your point is correct. We have to be really careful with that in all communications situations, but especially if diversity is involved. Okay, so let's move on to the next. It's important to understand that to have biases and stereotypes is to be human. It happens. As human beings, we create categories of people, places, and things. It helps us make sense of the world around us. All human beings need to feel that they are part of a group. It helps with our sense of identity. We want to feel good about the group that we belong to, and there's nothing wrong with that. The thing that we have to watch out for is knowing that these groups exist. For us to exist doesn't mean we have to demean another person's existence. But it happens in politics, it happens in sports, it happens with fraternities and sororities. It can even sometimes happen in families. So to think that it doesn't happen with individuals from different races, with different cultural backgrounds and then ethnicities is to be dishonest with ourselves and about the world that we live in. It happens. But there are times when it happens in a way that is unintentional. And let's see what we call that. That is what we call unconscious bias. Our fundamental way of thinking and looking at things and the way we encounter the world is sort of this hardwired pattern of making decisions, sometimes on a very unconscious basis. And we make those about others, and we make it based on what we feel, what feels safe to us, what feels right to us. Everyone has some biases, which can either be positive or negative, and which we may be unaware of. And that's where the unconscious aspect of it comes in. So let's look at this example. Less than 15% of American men are over 6 feet tall. Yet almost 60% of corporate CEOs are over 6 feet tall. Another point, less than 4% of American men are over 6 feet 2 inches tall. Yet more than 36% of corporate CEOs are over 6 feet 2 inches tall. So what does this tell us? There is an unconscious bias towards tall men in corporate America. So any man that is vertically challenged might feel some kind of way about realizing and knowing this. Does that mean that they go into an interview looking for a prospect that's 6 feet tall or more? No, it's something about what that person brings to the table, the presence of that individual, the way they may carry themselves, that leans into that unconscious bias. Thus, for they tend to get those positions and promotions more often based upon height. So if we can see that there is unconscious bias that happens in corporate America based on height, how can we not think that other diverse factors of how a person shows up is not impacting what happens in the workplace? Doesn't make us horrible people, it makes us human. But there's still something we can do when we learn. So something else that we've learned more about are microaggressions. A microaggression is a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional. They communicate hostility, they can be derogatory, and it shows a negative attitude towards a stigmatized or a culturally marginalized group. The person that's making these comments may be otherwise well intentioned and even unaware of the potential impact of their words. So, if we look at the images that we see before us, we have a doctor, and just based upon her appearance, she's mistaken for a nurse. You have a young lady, based upon her appearance, trying to wonder if she speaks English or not. And then we have another doctor who, just based upon his appearance, people want to assume that he's not from America. May not be malice behind those assumptions, but that doesn't change the hurt. So there are three kinds of microaggressions. The micro assault is the most conscious and intentional form of a microaggression. And it's the closest thing that resembles what we will experience as racism. What the comments of micro assaults have in common is their explicitness, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. Micro assaults are fairly direct forms of prejudice and discrimination. You also have micro insults. These communicate rudeness and insensitivity towards someone based on their racial identity or heritage. Some micro insults can seem like compliments to the person that's saying them. It could be somebody saying, "Oh my, you are such a credit to your race," or "You are so articulate." The individual may reveal, what it reveals is the surprise that a person of color can speak well. or that a person of color can do something that's awesome, that's a credit to the human race. And then you have micro invalidations, which they exclude or negate the experiences, feelings, or experiential reality of a person of color. This is a person that will say, I don't see color. Or they will assert that we are in a post racial time. Or they'll say something that you're being so sensitive, not everything is about race. Well, unless you are living in that person's skin and have walked the paths that they've walked, you really probably are not in a position to say that, even when you too are a person of colors, because everybody's journey is their journey. So let's look at how this can make a person feel and how it plays out. And I'm going to use the situation of another marginalized groups, and that is an individual who may be classified as obese or overweight. So the incident happens, and what happens is somebody says to the person, "Oh, you have such a pretty face." Well, the person perceives that they may think, so my face is fine, but my body is ugly. And then the reaction, the person giving it may feel like, wow, I just gave you a great compliment. And the person receiving it may feel awkward and may give even a nervous smile. And then you have the next phase where the person is unsure if they should even be offended or should they call it out, or they're not sure how to react. And then the consequence is that the person may feel insecure, the person may isolate and not further connect with that individual. The impact and the consequence can vary. So just take a minute to look at this image. This is an individual who may have heard these types of things, these microaggressions over many years. And so, how are they feeling? How have these things made them feel? Are they able to continue to let it roll off their backs and act as if they're all good? Are they able to use it to fuel them in a way that motivates them to make their own way and kind of cast all those things aside? Once again, each person is different. Therefore, their journey and the impact it may have can be different. So in this situation, this is an example of what we looked at on when we broke down the phases. So the person makes the comment, "Is your hair real? Can I touch it?" For them, it's pretty innocent. And even the person on the receiving end may be smiling, but once that is spoken, we have no idea what's really going on inside that person. It could be they could have heard that for the 10th time that week or the first time ever in life. But it can be anxiety producing and it could be traumatizing because they may feel like, why is my hair such a big deal? And it could cause them to start wearing their hair in a totally different style, feeling like they need to fit in, feeling like they're sticking out, as if they're bringing it upon themselves. There are a number of psychological implications that can happen related to microaggressions. This list that you see presented is just a few of them. But the point is to realize that the individuals are impacted by it. So, what can we do to increase the level of awareness to lessen the biases, whether conscious or unconscious, the stereotypes, the prejudice, as well as the microaggressions? So, it says use inclusive language. Well, a lot of people may feel that they already do this, but remember, your exclusionary language could be done on an unconscious level where you're not really even aware of it. So start to pay more attention to the words that you use. When it comes to exposing yourself to counter stereotyping, if there's a stereotype that you can be honest with yourself to say that you have bought into, actively try to expose yourself to things that can counter that belief. And remember, all these things that we're talking about is not just attached to one race or culture that could be the culprit. People of color can be culprits of this same type of behavior to another group, within their own group, in many different ways. So the work that needs to be done when it comes to embracing diversity, it falls upon everybody's feet. Something else you can do is to empower mentors from underrepresented groups. Um, it's a great thing to be able to encourage someone, to let them know that they have something that they can give and share to another person. And sometimes people don't get that encouragement to do that. Finding members of underrepresented groups that you admire. Just in day-to-day life, it doesn't have to be some huge person in history or on TV or in sports. Find people within your own community that are adding value to the world in a way that you can acknowledge it and share that with others. So, if you think about what would happen if everybody began to embrace diversity, and what would your work environment or even your personal life be like if that happened? As you think about that, if any aspect of the answer leans toward an improvement or something positive, then I want you to take another step. I want you to think about 2 to 4 personal actions that you can take that will enhance diversity in some environment, personal or professional. And then select one of those things and make a promise or a commitment to yourself to actually carry it out. Be specific. Hold yourself accountable to take one step towards improving diversity or helping someone better embrace it. Realize that we should not become judge and jury of someone based on one encounter with them, especially when we don't really know the person as well as we should. When we do this, it causes us to paint the entire group sometimes in a negative light. And this is how a stereotype of somebody can form so easily. Let's work to not let those type of encounters influence us in a way that impacts the way we act with others. Be honest with yourself about the ones that have already formed and try to do something to counter them and lessen their influence on the way you treat other people. Some other things you can do: you can read books, you can read magazines, you can watch movies and plays about different cultures and groups. Make sure you have a diverse friend group. Once things loosen up, a great way of exposure is traveling, even tuning in to different music that you ordinarily would not listen to. Sit next to a person who looks to have the least in common with you. Well, that will be post-COVID, or you will be 6 feet apart now. But the goal is, make sure that you're okay with stepping outside of your comfort zone. So, an overview. Take pride in your own uniqueness. Welcome others as the individuals that they are, realizing they're not just like you. Enjoy your simple similarities and your differences that you find amongst each other. And remember, different is just different. It is not bad. When you embrace diversity, you enrich the world. Different individuals valuing each other regardless of skin, intellect, talents, or years. That's an awesome way to sum up diversity. Remember, concern is your EAP benefit for yourself and anyone in your household. During this time of COVID, we are doing telehealth video sessions as well as telephone sessions. And remember, if you need us, please reach out and access this benefit. If you have questions or concerns related to this training or something else, please send us an email at concern@bmhcc.org, or you can always call us. No issue is too big or too small. Our services are always confidential and always free for you and anyone who lives in your household. So please access this underused benefit. Thank you so much for joining us for this special 30-minute concern talk, and we look forward to you participating in many other sessions in the future.